What if a simple act of kindness changed not just one life, but two? One cold winter night, a struggling single father rescues a young woman from the snow. She's unconscious, alone, a complete stranger. But when he checks her ID, he finds a name he never expected, one that ties her to the most painful chapter of his past. What follows is a journey of healing, second chances, and the quiet power of love that shows up when we least expect it. This is a story that begins in the snow, but ends in something much warmer. If stories of hope, love, and quiet miracles speak to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's more where this came from, and I'd love to have you here for the journey. Now, let's begin. The snow had come early that year. Cal Bennett tightened his grip on the steering wheel, the wind howling like a wounded animal outside his rig. Thick flakes blurred the headlights into a dull glow, and the road ahead looked more like a sheet of white paper than asphalt. He was on Route 6, halfway through Colorado's remote mountain pass, the kind of place where even silence had a sound. The heater hissed, trying its best against the cold that clawed through the cracks of the cab. Cal reached over, turned up the volume on the radio. Static, no signal this far up, figures. He glanced at the photo clipped above the dash. A little girl with auburn pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, holding a fishing rod bigger than she was. Sophie, 10 years old, and his whole reason for still trying. She was home with Mrs. Dwyer, the retired school teacher from 2 houses down who'd become part babysitter, part grandmother. Cal had promised to be back by midnight, if the snow let him. His eyes flicked to the clock. 9:47 p.m. The delivery had gone late. Chains on the tires, a frozen loading dock, and a rookie dispatcher who forgot to include the right paperwork. The kind of details that didn't make headlines, but chipped away at a man's soul. That's when he saw it. A shape, not deer, not a fallen branch. Something else. Human. Cal slammed the brakes. The rig skidded, fishtailing before it groaned to a stop. Heart pounding, he unbuckled, threw open the door, and leapt into the storm. The wind slapped him in the face as he trudged toward the figure. A girl, barely more than a teenager, lay crumpled near the guardrail, snow already beginning to bury her. Her coat was torn, her hands bare, her face pale with lips tinged blue. "Hey," Cal shouted, dropping to his knees. "Can you hear me?" No response. He checked her pulse. Weak, but there. She weighed almost nothing as he lifted her into his arms and staggered back to the truck, boots crunching through snow. Inside, he laid her across the passenger seat, cranked the heater, and reached for the emergency blanket. Behind his seat, "Don't die," he muttered, wrapping her up. "Come on, kid. Don't you quit on me now." Her backpack had fallen a few feet from where she'd collapsed. He retrieved it quickly, snow crusting its sides. Back in the cab, he rummaged through it, hoping for a phone. There wasn't one, just a wallet, a few crumpled bills, and a letter. It was the envelope that made his breath catch. He recognized the handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it. "Cal, if you're reading this, I didn't make it in time to tell you everything, but there's someone you need to meet. Her name is Emily, and she's not just a girl who needs help. She's part of the story I never had the courage to finish telling you. Please, be kind to her. You're the only one I trust. Jenna." The cab swayed as the wind gusted, but Cal didn't feel it. He read the letter twice, then a third time. The words didn't change. His wife's handwriting. Her tone, gentle, precise, unmistakably Jenna. But Jenna had been gone 3 years, dead in a highway crash, the kind that had accident written in the report, but left permanent fault buried in his chest. Cal had been behind the wheel that day. If he'd taken the other route, if he hadn't argued with her that morning, if he had just... He stopped himself. Emily. He looked at the girl again. So young, so broken. A stranger, or not. The heater had begun to take effect. Her cheeks flushed slightly and her fingers twitched. He reached for the CB radio. Still dead. No signal in this storm. He cursed under his breath, started the engine, and flipped on the high beams. "All right," he muttered. "You're coming home with me." The truck groaned as it pulled back onto the road, tires biting into ice. Cal kept glancing at her, his mind racing. Who was she? How did Jenna know her? What was the unfinished story? The wind howled louder, but inside the cab it was strangely quiet, just the low hum of the engine, and the silent presence of a girl who somehow held a piece of his past in her frozen hands. The storm hadn't let up by the time Cal pulled into his gravel driveway, the tires crunching over snow-packed ruts like brittle bones. The log cabin sat quietly in the dark, its windows glowing faintly from the porch light on a timer. Beyond, it stretched miles of empty woods, and above, a sky so full of snow it had swallowed the stars whole. Cal shut off the engine and sat for a long moment, staring at the girl still unconscious in the passenger seat. Emily. Her name echoed in his. Thoughts like something familiar and foreign all at once. He glanced again at the letter resting on the dash. Jenna's words were burned into his mind. "You're the only one I trust." A bitter smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You always did know how to drop a surprise," he murmured, then climbed out and came around to her side. Getting her inside wasn't easy. She stirred faintly as he lifted her, but didn't wake. She felt a little warmer at least, less like a corpse and more like someone who might come back. He kicked open the door with his boot and carried her into the cabin. The living room smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke. The fire in the hearth had long gone cold, but the woodpile by the stone wall was full. He laid her carefully on the couch and wrapped her in a quilt Jenna's mother had made years ago, thick, faded, and stitched with love that hadn't unraveled, even if everything else had. He built a fire with practiced hands, sparks crackling to life in the hearth. Warmth began to chase the chill from the room. Then he stood back, hands on hips, and finally took a breath. What now? She was still a stranger. Jenna hadn't told him anything about Emily. Not in the months before the crash, not in any of the letters she left behind, not in the hospital. Nothing. And yet, here was this girl, curled up like a secret waiting to be told. He went into the kitchen and filled the kettle. The place was quiet, except for the soft hiss of the fire and the wind pressing against the windows. He pulled a mug from the cabinet, Jenna's favorite one with the chipped blue rim, and filled it with chamomile tea, then sat down in the armchair across from her. For a moment, he just watched her sleep. She couldn't have been older than 19. Dark hair, pale skin, bruised knuckles. Her clothes were practical, layers, but nothing warm enough for this kind of cold. He imagined her out there on the road, alone, walking into the storm. Why? As if in answer, she stirred again, this time more deliberately, and groaned. "Hey," he said gently. "You're safe now." Her eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. Then she bolted upright with a gasp, the quilt falling from her shoulders. "Easy." Cal reached out instinctively but stopped short. "You're okay. You passed out. I found you on the road." She blinked, breathing fast, then pressed a hand to her temple. Where am I?" "My house, up in Echo Ridge, just off Route 6. You were hypothermic. I had to bring you in." She stared at him, clearly trying to decide whether to trust him or run. "I'm Cal Bennett," he added. "I live here with my daughter. You're welcome to stay until the storm passes." Her brow furrowed. "You read my ID?" "I read the letter," he said quietly. "That changed everything." Her whole body tensed. "You have no right," she began, voice sharp. "No," he interrupted. "I didn't. But I did it anyway, because it was from Jenna." At the mention of the name, Emily looked away. Her shoulders sagged. She said, "You'd come," Cal continued. "Or she hoped you would." A beat of silence passed. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind began to ease. "I didn't know she'd died," Emily said at last, voice barely a whisper. "Not until I got here." Cal nodded slowly. "It was sudden. 3 years ago, we were driving down to Glenwood Springs. A logging truck jackknifed." Emily stared into the fire. She used to write me letters every month since I was 12. Cal's breath caught. "I was in a group home back then. She never told me who she really was. Just said her name was Jenna and she cared." Emily's voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "She sent me books, told me about her garden. One year she mailed me a tiny snow globe. I kept it even when everything else got taken." Cal felt something shift inside him, something old, something fragile. "She saved me," Emily whispered. Cal looked down at his hands, rough, scarred, too used to holding grief. "She saved me too," he said. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Emily said, "I don't want to be a burden. I'll go as soon as the road's clear." "You're not a burden," Cal said firmly. "You're connected to her. That means something. You stay as long as you need." She looked at him, eyes shining in the firelight. "Why are you being kind to me?" Cal hesitated. "Because she asked me to." Emily nodded slowly, pulling the quilt tighter. Then, for the first time since she'd woken up, she smiled. Not fully, not fearlessly, but enough. It was a start. The next morning, the world was wrapped in silence. The kind of silence only a deep snow can bring. Thick, muffled, holy. The trees outside Cal's cabin bowed under the weight of white, and the road had vanished entirely beneath a soft, unbroken blanket. Even the wind had gone quiet, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Inside, the house felt different, not just warmer from the fire still burning low in the hearth, but somehow more alive. Cal stood at the stove in his flannel shirt and jeans, frying eggs in a cast-iron skillet like he had every morning for years. Except now, he wasn't alone. Emily sat stiffly at the kitchen table, eyes flicking from the window to the floor, to the back of her hand. She was dressed in one of Jenna's old sweaters, light blue, oversized on her small frame. She hadn't spoken much since last night, but she hadn't asked to leave either. That was something. He glanced over. "You okay with scrambled? Not a lot of gourmet options up here." She gave a small nod. "Scrambled is fine." He noticed the way she held her mug of tea with both hands, fingers pale but steady now. The girl from the roadside was slowly fading, replaced by someone still bruised but awake. He set a plate in front of her and sat down across the table. The chair creaked. The fire popped. It felt like sitting across from a ghost. She took a bite, chewed slowly. "Thank you for last night." He shrugged. "You needed help." She looked up at him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. People usually drive past. He didn't answer that. He could have. He'd done plenty of driving past in his life. Moments, people, feelings. That was the easier road, but not last night. A door creaked upstairs. Footsteps pattered across the hardwood, and then came the voice Cal knew better than any other. "Daddy?" Sophie stood at the bottom of the stairs, hair wild from sleep, feet in fuzzy bear slippers, holding her stuffed llama under one arm. Her eyes widened when she saw Emily. Cal stood. "Hey, sweetheart, come say good morning." Sophie padded over, peering at the stranger like only a child could. Curious, fearless, open. Emily smiled gently. "Hi." Sophie looked up at her dad. "Is she staying with us?" "For a little while," Cal said. "She got caught in the snow." Sophie nodded solemnly, as if that explained everything. "Okay." She turned back to Emily. "Do you like pancakes?" Emily blinked, then let out the faintest laugh. "I do." "Good." Sophie climbed into the chair next to her. "We have a rule here. If you like pancakes, you're allowed to stay." Cal raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Sophie nodded. "It's in the law book." The table eased into a kind of rhythm after that. Cal made another batch of eggs and poured cereal for Sophie. Emily relaxed by inches. She didn't say much, but she smiled once or twice, and that was more than enough. After breakfast, Cal went out to shovel the walkway, while Emily helped Sophie find her coloring books. The snow was knee-deep in places, glittering under the pale winter sun. Cal worked in silence, his breath steaming in front of him, muscles moving by memory. But his mind was racing. Jenna had written to that girl for 7 years. 7 years of a care, secrets, and never once told him. Why? He'd thought they'd shared everything. Even in the hard years, especially in the hard years, Jenna had been his anchor. She was warmth wrapped in stubbornness, the kind of woman who could bake her pie and win an argument at the same time. She was his compass, and now, somehow, she was still guiding him. From beyond the grave, he finished clearing the path and went back inside. The cabin smelled like cinnamon. Sophie must have lit one of the scented candles Jenna used to love. The living room was a mess of crayons and blankets and laughter. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor beside Sophie, who was proudly showing off a picture of a purple Christmas tree. Cal stood in the doorway for a moment, unnoticed, watching something unfold that he hadn't seen in years. Joy, not forced, not polite, just pure, messy joy. Later that afternoon, while Sophie napped upstairs, Cal offered Emily a cup of coffee and they sat by the fire. She held the mug close, as if it was more than warmth she needed, maybe something to ground her. "Why didn't she tell me?" Cal asked softly. "About you." Emily stared into the flames. "I asked her that once, in a letter, why she never came to meet me. She said, sometimes love isn't about being seen, it's about showing up." Anyway, Cal swallowed hard. "She said you'd been through enough," Emily continued, "that she didn't want to add more weight." He looked at her, really looked. "But you're not weight. You're part of her." Emily's lip trembled. "I never got to say goodbye." Cal reached into the drawer beside the armchair and pulled out something he hadn't touched in 3 years, a small photo album. He handed it to her. She wrote, "You letters," he said. "Maybe now you can read her story too." Emily opened the cover, and for the first time since arriving, her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in a long while, Cal didn't feel the crushing silence of grief. He felt the hum of connection, the soft beginning of something new. The sun made a rare appearance the next morning, glinting off icicles that lined the cabin's porch like glass teeth. Snow glittered across the valley below, untouched and blinding. The world looked peaceful, silent in a way that almost felt dishonest, as if hiding something beneath the stillness. Cal was stacking firewood when he heard the tires crunch over ice. He turned toward the driveway and narrowed his eyes. A silver Jeep with a cracked front bumper was crawling up the incline. He didn't need to see the driver to know who it was. Lily Carter. She parked unevenly, as always, and stepped out in her thick parka, scarf wrapped around her neck, stethoscope peeking from her coat pocket like it lived there. She was part nurse, part winter warrior, and all business when she had a purpose. Cal sighed. She marched up the steps, boots thudding. "You didn't call." "I didn't need to," he replied, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I heard from Mrs. Dwyer that you picked up a girl on the highway. That true?" Cal leaned against the porch post. "More or less." Lily folded her arms. And she's inside, resting." Lily's eyes narrowed. "You brought a teenage girl you don't know into your home in the middle of a snowstorm without alerting anyone. That doesn't sound like the Cal Bennett I know." He didn't answer right away. The wind picked up, rustling the branches. Above them. "She had a letter," he finally said, "from Jenna." Lily's arms slowly dropped. "A letter?" Cal nodded. Lily stared at him for a moment longer, then stepped past him and opened the front door without waiting for permission. Cal followed. Emily was in the living room, helping Sophie build a snow fort out of couch cushions and old sheets. She looked up at the sound of the door and immediately stiffened. Lily gave her a quick, appraising glance, then softened her tone. "Hi there." I'm Lily. I'm the local nurse around here. Emily sat up straighter, but didn't speak. She's been through a lot, Cal said quietly. She's staying a few days, just until she figures things out. Lily turned back to him. And you figured you could handle this alone? Cal clenched his jaw. She didn't need a hospital. She needed somewhere safe. Lily looked at him, really looked, and something shifted behind her eyes. She nodded once. I'll check her vitals just to be sure, she said, reaching into her bag. Sophie, sweetie, why don't you show me where your llama's hiding? While I chat with your friend? Sophie beamed. He's in the laundry basket. As the two girls disappeared upstairs, Lily guided Emily to the couch. She was gentle, professional, and quick. After taking her pulse and checking her eyes, she leaned back and said, "You're lucky he found you." Emily's eyes flicked to Cal, then back to her lap. I know, Lily hesitated, then added softly, I knew Jenna. That made Emily look up. She helped me get through my husband's passing. Never told me what she was dealing with herself. But that was Jenna, always giving more than she said. Emily's voice was quiet. She did that for me too. Cal felt something tighten in his chest. When Lily finished, she stood and motioned for Cal to follow her outside. He joined her on the porch, pulling the door closed behind them. I'm not going to tell you what to do, she said, crossing her arms again. But you're not a recluse anymore, Cal. You have a daughter. You've got people who care about you. You bring someone into your home like that, you need to let someone know. I wasn't thinking, he admitted. No, you were, she said, looking at him sharply. You were thinking with your heart. That's new. He let out a dry laugh. You make it sound like a diagnosis. She tilted her head. You've been locked up since Jenna passed. Everyone sees it. But maybe this girl, maybe she's not just a stranger, maybe she's a door opening. Cal looked out at the snow-covered trees. She reminds me of Jenna in some ways. Lily's voice softened. Maybe that's not a bad thing. They stood in silence for a while. The wind had picked up again, and the sun was already retreating behind clouds. A fresh storm was building. You staying for coffee? He asked, almost too casually. She looked at him, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Only if it's not from last Tuesday's pot. He chuckled. Fresh brew, Scout's honor. As they went back inside, Cal felt something he hadn't in a long time, a shift in the air, subtle but real. Like the cabin had grown warmer, not from the fire, but from the simple presence of people who cared, people who weren't afraid to ask hard questions and stay anyway. Later, after Lily had left and Sophie was tucked in bed, Cal sat at the dining room table with a pen in his hand and Jenna's letter beside him. He turned it over. Thought about writing something, anything, but the words refused to come. Emily walked in quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. I thought you might want this. He accepted it with a nod. Thanks. She sat across from him, silent for a beat. She was better with words than we are, Emily said. Cal smiled faintly. That she was. Emily looked at him then, really looked. You loved her a lot. I still do. Emily nodded. I think she'd be proud of both of us. And for the first time, Cal didn't feel the weight of the letter in his hand, like a burden, but like a bridge. That night, the snow returned, not as a storm, but as a quiet, steady drift, falling so softly that even the trees didn't seem to notice. The world outside was hushed, blanketed in a stillness that made everything inside the cabin feel more alive, more exposed. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor by the fire, her eyes fixed on the flickering orange light. Cal sat in the armchair nearby, thumbing the edge of a worn photo album, not quite reading, not quite remembering. Neither had spoken for a while, but it wasn't silence in the heavy sense. It was space, room for thought, room for truth. Emily finally broke it. She started writing to me when I was 12, and Cal looked up, his expression unreadable. I was in a group home in Denver, foster care, but not the warm kind. The kind where you sleep with your shoes on and keep your toothbrush in your pocket so no one steals it. He didn't interrupt. He knew the value of letting someone speak on their own terms. One day, the director called me into her office and handed